Welcome back. Today I'll be talking about Michael Jackson, the king of pop. In my research, I observed that there were people who already explored Michael Jackson's life through the lens of mental health. However, their approach failed to include the macro or societal context in which Michael Jackson lived. They treated him like an individual in a test tube rather than a person in a context. Michael Jackson was not just a product of his and his family's choices, but he was made in the USA in a certain context. Like many black people in the West, Michael Jackson was believed to be of mixed ancestry. In Jackson's specific case, his ancestors were enslaved Africans, Blackfoot, and other indigenous people, and Europeans. Both his parents, Catherine Esther Screws and Joseph Walter Jackson, claimed partial indigenous ancestry. For example, Michael Jackson's father reported that his great paternal grandparents were a Choctaw indigenous man named Jack and an enslaved black woman, Gina. In 1838, they had a son they called Israel or Nero, who was born into slavery. The Jackson name began with him, as he was called Nero, Jack's son, Nero Jackson. Nero was sold to a plantation in Louisiana. Nero repeatedly ran away from the plantation and was punished by each time being beaten almost to death. The last time he ran away, a heated tongue was used to squeeze his nose until he lost all feelings in his face. Remember this. It will be important later. In 1865, when slavery was abolished, Nero was 17 years old and married a three-quarters Choctaw woman, Emmeline. Additionally, Joe Jackson, Michael Jackson's father, reported that his maternal great-grandmother, Mattie Daniel, was born in 1864, a year before slavery ended, to a white daughter of an enslaver who was a plantation owner and a black man. The white people wanted to abandon the child, but because she was partially white, they were afraid that criminal charges would be brought against them. So after keeping her for a few months, the child was given to a black family to raise. Michael Jackson's father, Joseph Walter Jackson, was born on July 26, 1928 in Fountain Hill, Arkansas. His father was Samuel Jackson and was a school teacher, and his mother, Crystal Lee King, was a housewife. Joe Jackson was the eldest of 5 children. His father was the only black man who owned a car in the neighborhood, so they called him fondly Professor. His parents separated when he was 12, and at this time he went to live with his father in Oakland, California. Joe Jackson reportedly had a lonely childhood and did not have many friends. When he turned 18, he returned to Indiana to be near his mother. He was doing well as a boxer and was preparing for a professional athletic career when he met Catherine Screws at a party. Michael Jackson's mother, Catherine Screws, paternal grandparents were Julia Bell John, 25, and 29-year-old Prince Screws of Babor, Alabama. They were one generation removed from slavery. They had a child, Prince Albert Screws. He was Catherine's father and he was born in 1907. Catherine's maternal grandmother was Jeanette Brown, and her maternal grandfather was Daniel Upshaw. And they were from Alabama as well, and only one generation removed from slavery. Catherine's mother, Martha Screws, was one of 2 daughters born to them. Kathy B. Screws was born on May 3, 1930, in Clayton, Alabama. Her parents were Prince Albert and Martha Screws. Jackson's mother, Catherine, contracted polio at an early age, which impacted her for her entire life. At the age of 4, her father changed his name to Screws, a different spelling of the word Screws, and Katie's name to Catherine Esther Screws. Catherine's family was a part of the Great Northern Migration, and they moved to East Chicago, Indiana. She attended high school, where she was a member of the school band. Catherine was a talented singer and pianist. When Joe Jackson met Catherine, he annulled his marriage to his first wife and married Catherine in 1949. He was then 21 years old. He switched career path to become a full-time crane operator for U.S. Steel so that he could care for his family. Katherine worked part-time in a department store. The family of 11 lived in a 2-bedroom house that Michael Jackson said you could take 5 steps from the front door and you would be out of the back. Sounds like a slave shack, right? And they lived in a systematically impoverished, predominantly black neighborhood, like a plantation off the plantation. However, Joe Jackson dreamed of becoming wealthy, so in the mid-1950s he started a band with his brother Luther, but the band was not successful. Michael Jackson was the 8th of 10 children. One died at birth. Michael Jackson was born on August 29, 1958. In the early 1960s, his father, Joe Jackson, discovered that his children had musical talent. And by the mid-1960s, they would be famous. They would have won a talent contest at the Apollo Theater and would have signed a recording contract with Motown. But this success came at a great cost. So I'm setting you up. People like to take things out of context. Anything you know about them, remember that they started out in slavery, in a society in which the people that were enslaved were never given reparations. And they're struggling with all the pain and suffering and all the ways they were taught to have dysfunctional families, that their only purpose in life was to work for the master. They were taught not to love themselves. They were taught the only people worth loving were the parasitic enslavers that they called Master and Mrs. It's not many generations removed. So when we're going to talk about Michael Jackson, we will talk about him in the context of a cruel, racialized, white supremacist society in which he was made. And this is part 1. Thanks for listening.